Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Hag Sameach. Happy Tu Bishvat. I hope that everybody is already indulging in the light meal. Before I introduce Rabbi Gedaliah Gurfein, I feel it's incumbent to thank everybody who helped put this evening together. First of all, Kadosh Baruch Hu. All praises to the Lord. Number two, the Nitzinim Shul for allowing us to partake and to use the hall, the Landau Hall. And of course, Rabbi Gedaliah for coming and preparing. It's a lot of prep, but I think his whole life, I think you're in for a real treat. You know, if you haven't met Rabbi Gurfein, I found a word called edutainment. So it's definitely education, and it's definitely entertaining. And of course, we also have Cham Dovid and the band. Thank you very much. Shkoyach, shkoyach. Let's get a big round of applause now already. He's already been playing for half an hour. I want to thank my wife, Bina. First of all, the inspiration for Yiboneh is actually Bina's inspiration, as the letters of Yiboneh are the same letters of her name, Bina.
Wow.
And she is the one who had the vision to build a house for Hashem. I want to thank every single one of you for coming. We feel that, we know, I'm going to say 90% of you, we know personally you're part of our lives, you're part of Yiboneh, you've been to many of our events over the years, or the classes, or you watch online. And without you, we wouldn't have Yiboneh. I want to thank all the volunteers. Actually, there's too many to mention by name, but you know who you are. I also want to mention specifically the sponsors, and we have quite a few. This tonight is dedicated. Have in mind when we make our brachot for Mechaya Ruth, Bat Sarah Abraham, and this was dedicated by Marilee and Jonathan Bloom, which I'm not sure if they're here. Are they here? Raise their hand. No. Not yet. Okay, Bezrat Hashem, they'll be here. And the Strauss family, the Deutsch family, the Daniels family, and Dr. Harvey Benovitz and his wife, and Phil and Fega Schwartz. And anybody that would like to be added to this list, just come and see me anytime during the evening.
The names will be added.
The names, that's right, we'll add you onto the video. Okay, so I just wanted to start off just with an idea, and I don't want to take anything away from Rav Gedaliah.
No, take.
This day has more holiness and more its depth than many of us even think about. On a halachic basis, obviously, there are many details with the Trumas and Maasros and beginning of a new year, but from a more Kabbalistic point of view, which I believe that Gedaliah will speak about. Just one thing I want to add is that there is an argument in the Gemara, a Machlokes, when the world was created. Was it created in Nisan, or was it created, anybody know? Tishrei. Or Tishrei, obviously. Tishrei. So we really have a way of looking things, on one side and on the other side, on one hand and on the other hand. So we kind of have like these two calendars. So we have this idea of a conception and a birth. So even though Tosfos explains that there's really no machlokus between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, whether the world was created in Tishrei or in Nisan, one had to do with a conception and one had to do with a birth. And we know that Moshe Rabbeinu, he was born at 6 months in one day, right? A 7th month gestation period is a viable fetus. So it's very interesting that the 6 months to the day, from Pesach until Sukkot, or let's say from Rosh Chodesh Nisan until Rosh Hashanah is exactly 6 months. But if you count back how many days, right, before a baby is conceived, even 40 days before, there's already a decree. So we're talking about like from the thought before the actual conception. So if you count back from, let's take the 1st of Nisan, for example. So even though we say the world was created on the 1st of Nisan or the 1st of Tishrei, that's when man was created. So the world was really 5 days earlier. So you're talking about the 25th of Adar. Count back 40 days from before the 25th of Adar, and you have Tu Bishvat. So on a certain level, on a very Kabbalistic level, the original thought, like we say, 40 days before a child is even conceived, there's already a decree in heaven. I don't want to say the rest, but you know the rest, right? That who he will marry, who she will marry, and so on. Happily live happily ever after. So in a certain sense, somebody asked me why I'm dressed in all white. So in a certain sense, this is like the conception of Yom Kippur, right? Because if you actually think on another level, what is it? Let's think this through. So this would be 9 months, right? 8 months in 1 day. Before actually, let's just say Sukkot. Sukkot is exactly, we'll say 9 months, 8 months in 1 day from today. So the month of Tishrei, which, Yom Kippur is a central theme, right? Day of Judgment and everything involved. Also with Sukkot and Rosh Hashanah, everything surrounding Tishrei. So this is a day, a very special day for our prayers and our aspirations and the beginning of our thoughts for tshuva, for relationships, for wealth, for growth. It's, I'm sure that Rabbi will speak about it. And if we think about the trees, that's the whole idea here, because there is no visible growth, right? You're not even talking about any fruits for sure, let alone just the potential of the blossoms that are about to come out. And that's where we're holding, basically, in the pre-reality, if that's such a concept. It's the original concept already, and we are created in the image of God, and therefore we should hopefully use our own abilities to think and dream about what we want this coming year. And without any further ado, Rabbi.
Oh. Okay. First of all, hello. It's very nice to see everybody, especially a lot of people I haven't seen in a long time. And I'm really, thank you.
Is that good?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyhow, first of all, it's very nice to be seen and to see all of you. All of those are important things and very appreciated. And it's also quite amazing that so many people here recognize me, because I think the last time I might have seen you, I had like red hair maybe, and a lot of people come over and they say, "Where's your red hair?" And I say, at this point, I'm happy just to have any hair, so I'm really not hung up on the color thing anymore. But it's an amazing, as Rav Aaron said, the Tu Bishvat experience is kind of something which, a pun intended, is blossoming. I'm sure many of us that grew up never even heard of Tu Bishvat, and even those that may have grown up in some sort of a strong Jewish affiliated community might not really have paid too much attention to Tu Bishvat, except unless you're a minyan goer, then you're just really happy there was another day of not having to say Tachanun. But except for that, maybe you made a shechianu on a particular fruit, but that was about where it stopped. And suddenly creeps into Judaism, or seems to creep into Judaism, there's an idea called the Tu Bishvat Seder. Now, many people kind of feel like, is this really Torah Judaism? Is this just sort of something that grafted itself onto Judaism? Is this really maybe our deep inner Jewish nature that we love to party? So any opportunity, under any excuse, so okay, fine, yeah, whatever, let's do Tu Bishvat? Or is it really something that is growing, as Tu Bishvat is all about growing. And not just growing, but really, you think about it, it's kind of crazy to have if you're already going to have a new year for trees, which in itself is crazy, we'll talk a lot about this later, but if you're already going to have a new year for trees, so why not have it when the trees are at their best? You know, I mean, I don't know how many have been here in Israel many, many years, but for many years in Israel on the secular New Year, you would always have Israelis out there with these little plastic hammers hitting each other and lots of, you know, shaving cream sprayed all over. So could you imagine like walking into the forest and all the like little trees have these little hammers and they're all celebrating the New Year? I mean, how do trees celebrate New Year's? And why do trees have New Year's? These are questions we're going to get to. But if they're going to have it, at least have it at the prime, when the trees are filled with fruit and everything is blossoming, not when like 2 days ago, you know, the winds and the rains and the upcoming potential snow next week or maybe this week. So it's kind of a funny time. The trees seemingly are all dead. But yet we know that in fact, this lesson of the tree is a lesson for the human being. That's why there's an incredible connection, which we'll talk about later as well this evening, between the tree of all things and the human being. But the primary lesson that the tree teaches us is never give up hope. That no matter how dark, how miserable things may appear on the outside, things are never as they appear on the inside. And therefore, on the outside, where the world of trees and so on seems to be deteriorating and falling apart and lifeless, actually inside, it's the beginning of Tchiyat HaMetim. It's the beginning of the resurrection of the dead. And there's a tremendous unification that happens in the end of days between the tree and man. And that we'll save for a little bit later. But I do want to start off, everyone has, can I just snag that for 1 second? Everyone has hopefully one of these wonderful booklets from a tremendous organization, Livnot Libanot. And if you just take a minute and turn there to page, here we go, page 10. So you'll notice on page 10, at the bottom of the page there, they have put together their 4 questions, which I think is really cute because it gives a Seder-like effect, you know, Passover 4 questions and this one having 4 questions. The only thing is, I must tell you, I spend, Baruch Hashem, 99% of my days these days immersed in Gemara. So when I look at this, my mind immediately starts and I suddenly realize, well, what really is the difference between the first and the third question? But we're not going to go into that. We're just going to say it's really nice, it's really good, and we'll use that as a platform. I couldn't resist it. So you're going off into what this is all about. So I want to say one more thing. Are we actually going into this now, or am I just like, this is an intro till they start to eat?
We ate already.
We ate already. I blinked. Okay, all right. So forget everything. I'm going to start all over again. We'll just dive in.
There will be lots of fruits.
Oh, fine. Great. Okay. My bad. So let's do like this. I'll tell you a very interesting thing. We have in Chazal a concept that something which is of essence of importance always will happen in thirds, or 3 times rather. And this idea is also, it's an argument in the Gemara, but basically we hold that 3 times creates what's called a chazaka, which is from the language of chazak, which is strong. That once something like the gimel has 3 legs, has a tripod, then something is stable. And so therefore, for something to be permanent in the world, it comes in forms of 3s. So therefore, the redemption works on levels of 3s as well. We all know the primary redemption, or the initial redemption, is Passover. Passover was physical freedom. Without physical freedom, without Kemach, ain't Torah. Therefore, physical freedom was the necessity for the nation to be able to come out and begin its elevation, which you know culminates, or at least on one level culminates on Shavuot. But Passover is the first, and that's the 15th of the month of Nisan. And the reason it's in the month of Nisan is because, as Reb Aaron pointed out, according to Reb Yeshua from the language of redemption, the world is created in the month of miracles, Nisan, and in the letters of Hashem's name, the 4-letter Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. So since in the letters of Hashem's name you have 4 letters, 2 of which are the same, you have a Hey 2 times in the word. Therefore, the combination capacity is going to be 12. It'll be 4 times 3. So therefore, there are 12 different ways that Yud K Vav K can be ordered. These on the higher worlds are the levels. Each order of God's name is a different hashpa'ah. It's a different influence. It's a different mazal that creates the 12 months. This is why the word month chodesh, which is also from the word chidush, which means novelty or perpetual newness, is equal to 12 for the 12 months, times 26, which is Yud K Vav K, is 312, which is the gematria of chodesh. So the power of newness is only through connection to God. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, while as the physical world was probably created more along the language of Tishrei, and Tishrei is the world of nature, because we see Bereshit bara Elokim, which was a big problem when the rabbis had to translate the Torah into Greek, because if you ever think about these words, it sounds like, God forbid, there's a God called Bereshit, and Bereshit bara Elokim. This God, God forbid, created Elokim. So therefore, the mystics say that actually the very first word of the Torah is invisible, because it cannot have a form in a word. And that's the name of Yud K Vav K. That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name as expressed in Kulo Chesed, complete kindness. And kindness knows no borders. Therefore, it cannot be fit into the vessel of a word. So the real way to read the Torah would be Hashem Bereshit, at the beginning of this creation, Bara Elokim. Hashem created a new name called Elokim, which will be the numerical value of Hateva, the world of nature. And this world will be a world where we'll call it Olam, from language Alam, which means it will be a world where God will be hidden. And so therefore, even if you look at the word Tishrei, you'll still see a path back to God. Because Tishrei are the Hebrew letters backwards, Taf, Shin, Resh, but nonetheless they lead to Yud. They still bring, even through the world of nature, one can come back to understanding the presence of God. But on the Chodesh of Nisan, there, the 4 letters of God's name are as God's name is written. Because there, in the complete revelation of everything, of complete godliness, there are no boundaries. Nothing, not even Mitzrayim, could hold Am Yisrael. The second Geula becomes the Geula of Purim, which is, of course, in the month prior to Passover. And there we have, of course, on Purim, we have the famous expression, Kimu v'kiblu. The sages ask, what are they being kiblu? That which were they kimu, what that they had kiblu. So the question was, what exactly was it? And the majority of the sages say that it was referring to the oral Torah. Because there's a very strange question back at the Mount Sinai experience. The Jews turn around and they say, Nasa v'nishma. That's like amazing. We see in a minute, which I'll come back to. So just hold it over here for a second. We see that Hashem even said, hey, who told the Jews my secret password? Right? It wasn't swordfish, right? It was Nasa v'nishma. Okay, I see there's not enough people here who are really into the Marx Brothers, so I'll skip those references. So it's really Nasa v'nishma. Oh, okay, thank you. There was one. Good. So Nasa v'nishma is a secret. And the Jews had this secret, and it's wonderful. So why did God have to take a mountain, put it over our heads, and say to us, hey, if you don't accept the Torah, we're going to bury you right here? What? We just said Nasa v'nishma. Hello? We just said Nasa v'nishma. Why are you threatening us? A lot of opinions on that. But one of them is, we only said Nasa v'nishma on Torah Shebektav, on the written Torah. That we could completely accept that it comes from God. The oral Torah, I don't know, a lot of people, rabbis, shmabbis, mabbis, right? Who really knows? Maybe God really meant this, but we really said this. I mean, all you have to do is open up. You know, I'm imagining somebody who walks in to learn about Judaism for the first time in their life, and somebody says, okay, we're going to learn about Rosh Hashanah, and they get all excited, and they open the first Mishnah in the Gemara, Rosh Hashanah. The first thing they see is there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs. Seriously? How many people in the world have 2 Rosh Hashanahs, and we have 4 Rosh Hashanahs? And then you get into Gemara, you find out there's even more than the 4. I mean, it's like, right? We have 4 fathers, but there are really only 3 of them. We're told you're not allowed to eat ham, but our founding father's called Abraham. So, I mean, what happens with the Jewish people where all of a sudden we can't just have like a simple Rosh Hashanah? It's got to be, I don't keep that one. Okay, that's probably what it is. I got it. Like, I don't daven there, I don't keep that one. But all of a sudden you open up to these 4 Rosh Hashanahs, and in these 4 Rosh Hashanahs happens to be a Rosh Hashanah for the trees, no less. Okay, so therefore, coming back for a minute, this concept of Nasiv and Nishma as the key to receiving the written Torah, we were willing to do, but we weren't willing to necessarily lay our lives down, which is kind of heavy, for the oral Torah until Purim. Until the concept of God in this world as Alam, that we wish to make God Melech of the hidden, King of the hidden, that the Malchut, the rise of the power of feminine, which is because, as you know, in the Sfirot, there are only 2 feminine Sfirot, and that is Bina and Malchut, and they have an intricate relationship which brings the ultimate Geula. Or, as Rabbi Ginsburg points out, that actually the 3 Geulas also have this power of Aim from Bina, Aim being mother, because it begins with Aaron, Moshe, Aleph, Mem, which is Aim, and then it goes to Esther, Mordechai, which is Aim, and then it will be Eliyahu, Mashiach, which is Aim. So this power, all of a sudden, when we come into the darkest moment of it all, on the holiday of Purim, we discover that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everywhere. Everywhere in everything at all times. That becomes Torah Shebektav and Torah Shebal Peh. But we know as Jews, when we talk about things like world peace, it means to say that unless there's peace everywhere in the world, including in Igua, Nigeria, until there is peace everywhere in the world, it's not called peace. A lot of pieces, but not world peace, not tikkun olam. So therefore we have to go and understand what is then the ultimate tikkun olam. When we get our act together, we pull together the whole world. There's a very cute little story like this. The story was, I don't know how many of you are former Americans or currently Americans, but most people who are American will probably admit that one of our fortes is not geography. So, yeah, that was confirmation, thank you. Okay, so there was a teacher in American day school or whatever, and the kids were like bouncing off the walls, and she needed just a few minutes of quiet R&R. So she handed out to all the kids in the classroom a map of the world, and she said, you know what, why don't you cut up the map and put it back together again? She felt this was guaranteed 15, 20 minutes of silence. But after 3 minutes, one kid, not particularly smart, comes up and hands it back to the teacher, and it's perfect. She said, it's amazing. How'd you do this? And he said, before I cut it up, I turned it over and I drew a picture of myself. So when I put myself together, I was able to bring the world together. So when I bring together, when Am Yisrael brings together and comes together in a form of unity, which is a key point we're going to get to in a few minutes, that unity will bring the world together. Where did the world fail in that unity? In one of the strangest Gemaras, I think it's a Gemara in Sukkah, could be wrong, but I think so, where the Gemara says, when you look at the creation process, one of the steps in the process of creation is God says to the trees that you should be tree-bearing fruit, and not just tree-bearing fruit, but even your bark should have the same taste as the tree. Now, I don't know like the last time you went over and bit into an orange tree, but it does not have the taste of orange. But that was what God said. And by the way, if you look at that, where do you find in the Torah that God said create trees that have no fruit? It's not written. Yet we have trees that don't bear fruit. And we have trees whose bark do not represent or have the taste of their fruit. So in some strange way, these creatures called trees, who seemingly have no free will whatsoever, rebel against God. They rebel. And yet somehow or another, as our sages tell us, that the consequences of the rebellion of the trees only becomes poel. It only comes into action once Adam and Eve themselves rebel against God. So there's already in the very beginning of creation some deep spiritual connection between the tree and the human being. The Malbim points this out in a very beautiful way. whereas in the first parak in Tehillim it says that man should be like a tree, the Malbim jumps on the word like, probably the most popular word in English today, matched only by the most popular word in Hebrew, ki'ilu. Right? I love when I go into a store and I'm asking for something, and the guy says to me, it's ki'ilu. I said, no, it's not ki'ilu, it's real, it's now, it's here. No ki'ilu. Nonetheless, God uses the word like, so what can I do? So he says the man should be like a tree. So the Malbim says like a tree means also not like a tree. So like a tree, because a tree, its fundamental source is the earth, and therefore its roots run deep under the ground, and it draws its nourishment from the source. So we also should be like the tree, that we should draw from our source, but yet our source is a flip, 180 degrees the other way. We are rooted in heaven, and therefore our roots should be in heaven, because the more that we are an inverted tree with our roots in heaven, the more the winds that get stronger and stronger in the current events of the world we live in will have no effect on us. But if we don't have those roots, God forbid, when the powerful winds come, we could be blown away. So therefore, we have to be like the tree. Now, what else do we know about tree roots? It's very interesting, because if you talk to people who really know something about trees, they'll tell you a fascinating thing, that trees know how to literally, through their roots, talk to other trees. And trees have this ability to be able to communicate upcoming weather situations, potential danger situations, all kinds of information happens in trees. Well, guess what? Long before they discovered it, we have a sefer called Bereshis Rabbah. And in Bereshis Rabbah, I think it's in the second parak, I don't remember more than that right now, I'm sorry. But in Bereshis Rabbah, you will find that it says clearly that the tree communicates as a community with other trees, and it even communicates with the animals of the fields. So you see, nothing new under the sun. But Shlomo Melech meant to hint that there is something new above the sun, and that's Torah. That is perpetual. So let's come back for 1 minute to Torah, and then we're going to lock it in on Shvat. So in terms of Torah per se, let's go back to Nasa v'Nishma. Where did Nasa v'Nishma come along? Well, I want to tell you something. If you believe in one God, which is kind of fundamental to Judaism, I mean, maybe not like Kugel on Shabbos, but it's certainly high up there. If you really believe in one God, what does that mean? Well, that means, on a simple level, you don't have to even be smart to get this one, it means that God created, catch this, every human being. Not every Jew. There's not like one God who's like cranking out, people in South America and then cranking out people in Asia, and like they're fighting for market share. It's just one God. And one God creates all human beings. Nobody left behind. Nobody. Doesn't matter creed or where they born, male, female. Everybody created through the love of God. And not just created by God. It wasn't like God created the Jewish people and then like had leftover spinal columns and things like that, Oh, okay, I'll make another nation. It wasn't like, people weren't made as leftovers. Every human being is an imperative. At the moment the first pixel, see, I spend too much time in the computer world. At the moment of the very first thought of creation, at that moment, just think about that moment. It's kind of a funny moment. There was God and only God. So God is kind of like Godding, right? Because there's nothing else to do. God's just kind of Godding. And then all of a sudden, who knows what caused it, but at that moment, all of a sudden God goes, oh my me, right? Because he wouldn't say, oh my God, right? So he said, oh my me. And then all of a sudden, I forgot creation. And there it is. So at that moment, everything of creation was there, including you, including me, including every human being, as imperative. So therefore, let's hone it down a little bit. Let's try to figure out, because a lot of times we watch too much sports and we think that different countries are the good guys and the bad guys. That's not what it's about. We're all good, we're all bad. We all have our struggles. Everybody wants to live, and everybody would like to live well. And it can be done as long as we can remove these barriers and see the unity of life. So all of a sudden, God is about to present the Torah to this world of his. He doesn't go to the Jews first. He goes to Ishmael, he goes to Esav, he offers them the Torah. I mean, just imagine how different the world would have been. Okay, I'll take it, thanks, yeah. Is it in Arabic? I'll take it, fine, no problem, right? I mean, could have been. I mean, he was making a real offer. So what happens? Each one of these nations are not playing poker with God. They're telling the truth. They're saying, you know what, God, I really wish I could take the Torah, but I have a fundamental flaw that I have to deal with. As the Maharal says, there is no greater flaw than to think you're flawless. So they recognize their flaw. They're human. They see who they are. They understand. Ishmael says, I have a problem, an innate problem with this. It's not going to allow me to really keep the Torah properly. I would love to. And Esav says the same thing. I got an anger management problem, and I'm aware of it, and I acknowledge it, and I really want to become a better person, but I know I can't do it through your Torah. But there's Yaakov. Yaakov can do it. And so Hashem brings the Torah to the Jews. And Ishmael and Esav comes with God to the Jews. And they come over to Yaakov and they say, listen, we know that we can't do this, but we know we can do it together. Right? I want to digress for a minute just to fill you in, those of you that are holding and learning, as they say. Rashi says the very beginning of the Torah should begin Chodesh Zeh Lechem, because that's Tachlis, that's what it's all about. So what's all the rest of this stuff? Well, that was the Torah of Esav and Ishmael. That was the struggles and what's going on, even if it's reflected in our own Jewish history. These are really the struggles of Esav and Ishmael. That should have been partly their Torah. But now Chodesh Zeh Lechem is no longer our beginning, but we now get the entire Torah. So Ishmael and Esav come over and they say to Yaakov, we want to give you something about our Torah that you need to know to get your Torah. And Ishmael, Shomeya, gives Nishma. And Esav, Asa, gives Naseh. So Naseh v'Nishma are the gifts of Ishmael and Esav to Am Yisrael, to show that on a pure level we are all created by God and we together can fulfill God's world. So now, how does that actually work, Naseh v'Nishma? What does that mean? So there's a concept called Atbash. Don't freak out. It's not Kabbalistic. It's actually in the Gemara. And Atbash is really a simple concept of that everything which is revealed has a hidden side. So if you see the power of a letter Aleph, on the hidden side of it is a Taf. If you see a Bet, it's a Shin, and so on, all the way down to the middle, Kol. Ba-Kol, Mi-Kol, Kol. And so therefore what it means is that this is the idea of wholeness, that there's two sides to everything in this world. So when you look then, using this concept, we have an idea that mitoch shelo lishma, bo lishma. A person who begins to involve themselves in the performance of the commandments will come to a holy place because of the holy nature of the commandments. And this holiness will allow the human being to grow from a child into a mature adult, into an angelic being. That's our opportunity. If we don't do that, we are trees with no fruit. If we only mature, we are trees that have fruit, but we're not completely fulfilled. If we become angelic, then we become the one tree that actually fulfilled the will of God, and it is the esrog tree. The esrog tree, according to our sages, is the only tree, possibly a second opinion of a pepper tree, but the esrog tree is the only one whose bark also has the taste of the esrog. And this is why the Bnei Yisachar points out that it's a big mitzvah on Mincha tomorrow afternoon to pray for your etrog and your arba minim, because this is the connection, which we're not going to go into tonight, between the arba minim, sukkah, and also this idea. Although we do know that sukkah is the holiday of the future. Sukkah is the holiday post-Mashiach. So that's why it has this integral connection into Tu Bishvat, because this is the connection of completeness between man and tree. So nonetheless, how does this work, this Naseh and Nishma? And by doing this, we will hear or see or perceive God. So if you look at the word mitzvah, you have 4 letters: Mem, Tzadi, Vav, Hey. Now, the Vilna Gaon explains that the name of God really should not be written in one line, but one upon the other. so that you have a Yud and a Hey at the top, and under the Yud and the Hey is a Vav and a Hey. So the Yud lines up above the Vav, because these are the positive commandments. They begin with an idea, and the only way to bring it into the world is like if the head is the Yud, then the body is the Vav. So the Yud is brought through positive action into the world. The other world is a Hey lined up above a Hey. These are the restraining mitzvahs. By not touching the Hey, it remains a Hey, even in this world. Don't pollute the sea. Don't destroy the ecology of our world. Don't ruin what God created as beautiful. Allow it to remain as it is. These become the two, if you will, xylem and phloem, like in a tree, that move these energies between heaven and earth. So the Vav and the Hey, therefore, is the expression of God in this world. And the Yud and the Hey is expression of God in the hidden above us world. Is it hidden? Yes, it's hidden. It's hidden by the letters Mem, Tzadi. The Atbash of Mem is Yud. The Atbash of Tzadi is Hey. So the word mitzvah actually is Hashem's name. So when you're taking hold of a mitzvah and performing a mitzvah, you are actually a conduit of godliness going through you and bringing that holiness into this world. So, back to Shvat, and then we'll hold it for here for a bit. This idea, therefore, of Shvat is the third Geula. And the reason that this one was hidden or under the ground or not known and now is starting to come to life and starting to blossom is because its time is approaching. And therefore, in this idea of when we say in the Torah, we say that Adam ke eitz b'sadeh, that man is like a tree in the field. Think about that. Everybody loves to quote that verse, especially this time of year. But do you ever stop to actually think about it? It's a man is like a tree in the field. Therefore, if the tree is in my garden, I'm not like it. I mean, it's only because the tree's in the field. Why does a tree have to be in a field to be like a man? It seems like a ridiculous qualifier. Why qualify? Just say man's like a tree. Full stop. Why does it have to be man's like a tree in a field? What's a field? Oh, it's the playing field. It's the game field. It's the place where the clock ticks. I no longer say tick-tock. But it's the place where the clock ticks. And while the clock ticks, every time you put the ball through the rim, you get 2 points. Every time you do something while you're still alive, you score. Because this is the field. And this is why Yitzchak went into the field. Because Yitzchak is ultimately associated with the concept of the total creation's redemption. Because he gave his life for God. And therefore, this whole idea of Yitzchak means that although Yitzchak is from the side of din and darkness, his name is laughter. Because not that he could laugh from a distance, but he could laugh because he could go into death, he could go into darkness, he could meet the Malach HaMavos, the angel of death, and realize, wow, you know what? The Malach HaMavos isn't such a bad guy after all. He's just another angel. He's just doing the will of God. That's all he's doing. And all the angels that sit on the side of din, you know what? Why do they sit on the side of din? Because they're about justice. They're jealous for God. They're not on our side first. And this brings us to the conclusion. This is why there is an argument, dafka, between Shammai and Hillel. Because Shammai is about God first. Shammai is about how do I serve Shamayim? What does heaven want? When I come to Hanukkah, I look at heaven. Heaven is filled with light. I light all 8 candles on the first night of Hanukkah. And slowly, 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 as these little lights come down into the world, it reaches the one individual who becomes the standalone little candle down here. But Hillel says, that's not us. We're not angels. We're people. I start on earth. I begin with you. I begin with you. I begin with me. Each little candle, light it, light it, light it, light it. And before you know it, you don't need a bonfire. But you have tremendous light from each one of us finding our unique Tselem Elohim, waking it up and bringing it to life. Therefore, the struggle between Shammai and Hillel are really not opposites. Because even in the Hanukkah example, where you go from 1 to 8 and 8 to 1, Or in our situation now, how could it be either it's Rosh Chodesh or it's the 15th? How could they both be right? How could it be Zeh v'zeh divrei Elokim Chaim? How does that work? I'll show you a magical answer from the Maral. Watch this carefully. It's got a little audio visual here now. You have a line that's going like this. Okay? It's going from here to here. That's one line. Hold that in your mind, please. Now you have another line. It's going from here to here. Clearly going in opposite directions. I'll make it simpler. 8 to 1, 1 to 8. Clearly going in opposite directions. How could they both be the will of God? The answer is because, like on Passover, when we break the matzah, we don't have the full picture. But our minds can apply the full picture and fit in the missing parts. Watch the missing parts. The missing parts are these two sides. So watch what happens when I connect this with this. It goes in the same direction. It's only because we lose sight of the connectors between heaven and earth that we think that what heaven's all about is totally diametrically opposite than what earth is all about. But when we see it whole, we see that it actually all moves in that same direction. Therefore, Shammai from Shemuah is from the beginning of perception. He can already see in the Rosh Chodesh the power of redemption. Hillel, from language Hallel, has to actually see it revealed in order to pronounce it. But they're together as one. It's step 1 and it's step 2. And that's why the holiday of Shvat is the one that begins to emerge. And that's why Shvat is also from the word staff, because this is the staff of life. This is when the first time in the Torah that the Torah was referred to as Eitz Chaim He is this week's Parsha, Yitro. Because what happened when God said the first 2 of the 10 commandments, which were said simultaneously, many of the Jewish people died, and the rest of them were blown so far away that angels had to bring them back. But the Jews that died went through resurrection of the dead. And then they come over to Moshe and they say, whoa, that was awesome. But how many more are there? And Moshe, I don't know, about another 600 something. So they go, well, what if we don't come back one of those 600 times? Is this a tree of death? And Moshe says, no, it's a tree of life. It's so much life, you'll never die. Even if you shed your body, you will never die, because we will all come back in the resurrection of the dead. This is the lesson of the tree. No matter what it looks like outside, it is celebrating the rejuvenation of its life to begin again, and to begin again, and to begin again. And I bless us that this should be a Seder that opens up a lot of light in heaven, and especially the light in ourselves, in understanding what we are blessed with innately inside of ourselves to become on that angelic level we have the capacity to be. Shana Tova.
Yeah. calls. I wasn't making phone calls or writing
I
WhatsApp.
was just happy to see you. I didn't care about your phone.
My teacher, paranoid.
I assumed if anything, pictures.
Once when we gave a shirt on Shavuos, and I went over
Real
there.
quick announcement, everybody. We're bringing out the wine. There will be 4 cups of wine. We start with white, then we move into white mixed with red, and then finally the 4th cup is totally red. If you guys drink all the wine now, we won't have any left to do the 2nd and 3rd cup with. So just slow down.
We have it to Hillel.
Wait for the rabbi to introduce what we're going to do with the cups of wine. So you can pour yourselves, but please don't drink it all. And there's also grape juice.
It's encapsulated, but we only have one.
That's all you need right now.
It's scary.
I understand.
It's Hashem.
So please send me the name.
I'm going to. You know what? Let me bring my phone over. Sure.
Okay.
I hated to have to do that, but I hated to have to do that.
Nah, it's good. It's good.
Wrong. This says we start with white.
Huh?
This says we start with red. That's wrong.
We start with white,
Okay, doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter to me. So start with that. I was always told it's like Yom Kippur.
I think the idea is that it's coming
Shalom, shalom. Hello, hello.
You know what Abel?
I think maybe once.
Really?
Yeah, long ago. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the best part. The best part of the. Okay, that was. I did my Groucho Marx reference. No one got that. I guess nobody was really into the Doors, so skip that also. Okay, never mind. We're going to do
Burt
four.
Bacharach. I'm waiting for Burt Bacharach.
Yeah. Okay, I can't quite do that one. Sorry. We're going to be doing now 4 cups of wine, and you have, I believe, these little teeny shot glasses, which are actually, believe it or not, they're a revit. I want to just say there is no halachic issue of the 4 cups of wine. So you don't really need to worry about leaning. You don't have to worry about drinking it in one gulp. You know, it's just kind of as this, I guess, is emerging. But I'd like to just, before we do, I want to associate the first cup with the first question in the booklet. Yeah, thanks. I think I've memorized it at this point. So if you notice, the first question there is why on this specific date? And this brings there a whole concept there about Tu Bishvat and why it's on the day and so on. I just want to point out that Tu Bishvat, this might sound like, as they say in Spanish, a kleinigkeit, but it's really not a kleinigkeit. It's just being more meduyak, more exact. Tu Bishvat is not a holiday, meaning to say, and here it suggests as if the Chachamim, the sages, created this holiday. But that's not exactly how maybe other people would relate to that. Rather, it's not a holiday, but it's a Rosh Hashanah. And a Rosh Hashanah doesn't necessarily have the din of a holiday unless a holiday aspect has been associated with it, such as the classic Rosh Hashanah, right? So there it's a combino of a holiday and a Rosh Hashanah. But the idea of Rosh Hashanah, since we talked about the name of Hashem in its 12 aspects and how they correlate to the 12 months, now we're going to take it up one more notch. And that is that Hashem's name, as we know, has 4 letters. And each one of these letters is what we would call an Av. Right? In Hilchot Shabbat, people are familiar with the idea of Av and Toldot. It doesn't really mean a father and its children. It's really a relationship between primary and an intimate secondary. In other words, a secondary which comes from and infused in the primary, but it's no longer part of the primary. It's an extension of the primary, and now it has its own identity, if you will. So that same idea, each one of these letters have their own primary aspect. And that's why there are 4 Rosh Hashanot, because each one of these Rosh Hashanah is correlating to a different letter of Hashem's name. And so when we begin to understand this, we begin to see something very interesting. And that is, when you look at the first Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah, the first Mishnah you would imagine would be the classic Rosh Hashanah, blowing the shofar, etc., because that's the one that most people know about, and that's the only one that really has a halachic ramification. For example, the Rosh Chodesh, which it starts with, the Rosh Hashanah, which it starts with the Rosh Hashanah of Nisan, is a Rosh Chodesh. Now there are dinim, of course, of Rosh Chodesh, but the concept is not one that has Isser Malacha, for example. One can turn on and off lights on Rosh Chodesh, etc. And so when you come to the next one, which is Rosh Hashanah, for the Ma'aser of the animals, the Behemoth, determining which flock they belong to according to their birth before or after this particular day, except for Reb Shimon and Reb Elazar, who hold that that's actually combined into the Tishrei one. That also has no halakhic ramifications whatsoever. And so the third one, which is the idea of real Rosh Hashanah, so that's already the one that we know. And then the fourth one, the last one, is the one that we're commemorating today. So it's not actually a Hag. Therefore, I mean, we joke and we might say Hag Sameach. It might be more appropriate just to say Shana Tova. But the truth of the matter is, it really is not a Hag. It certainly was not created by our Chachamim. It was created by Kodesh Baruch Hu, and therefore was transmitted through the Torah Shebal Peh, which we believe is holy as the Torah Shebiktav. So therefore, in that idea of the Hag of Shvat, sorry, I just said Hag. The new year of Shvat, it's the last letter of God's name. Because the first one, the revelation of Nisan, is Yud. And then when we come across to either, let's say, Behema or it's called a Behema, if you will, that Behema is a concept of a Behema has a nefesh. And a human being has a nefesh. But a human being has more than just a nefesh. But when a human being violates the will of God, it's because they've lost touch with their ruach and their neshama, and the only component that was left in them is their behema, the nefesh, the animal nefesh in them. And that's why the human being can transfer that nefesh into an animal. This is the concept of smicha, that when an animal is brought as a korban, as an offering in the Beit HaMikdash, the person bringing it had to put their entire body weight on the head of the animal, as if to transfer their animal nefesh, which sinned, into this animal. And therefore this animal is now going to be in place of the person who themselves should really be the one that's being sacrificed. So that becomes associated with the second letter, which is the Hey, the heavenly Hey. The heavenly Hey is equated to, on Passover, the Rasha. Right? The first one is the Hacham, that's the Yud. The Rasha is the Hey. And that Rasha, the Rasha really is Rash. It means noise. A person who is an evil person is simply somebody who's trapped in their own confusion and their own noise. That's why if you read very carefully, what do you do with the Rasha? Well, you don't throw him out of your house, because that's why he's sitting at your Passover table. And you integrate him the best you can. Now, many people think that you answer the Rasha by knocking out his teeth. I don't think so. Especially if you've ever learned Baba Kama and all the rest of that. You understand you're not allowed to knock out somebody's teeth because of their opinion. But if you read it very carefully, what it really says is you flick the shin. Shein, tooth, shin, shchina. Every time we analyze a Hebrew word, the outer letters of the word are its shell, and the middle letter is its essence. So for example, the name Moshe, its outer letters are mem, hey, ma, nachnu ma, what are we? If that's what we're all about, is our outside, that's nothingness. But if we're on the inside letter of Moshe, it's shin, which is shchina, which is the divine light, that where we can strip off our ego and allow our image of God to shine, then that becomes like Moshe Rabbeinu. We can rise to heaven as long as we remain authentically humble. The Rasha, the outer letters are the word evil, Ra, Resh, Ayin. Because it's really, if you raise children, one of the things you hopefully learn is you never tell the child that he's a bad child. You tell the child that what he's done is bad, but not that the child is bad. So the Rasha's evil is only on the outside. And if you could wake up, bing, 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 if you could hit that little shin and make it start to shine and start to let the Shekhinah emanate, then that child, that person, we're all children, we're all B'nai Israel, that child will be able to free him or herself from that shell of that evil. That's the Hey. And then the Vav is action, call to action. That's the Rosh Hashanah we know. That's where it's all on the line. That's where it all comes down to. Every time we say Bayamohu, it's talking about Rosh Hashanah. As Rabbi Nachman says, that's the one day. That's the day to make it happen. Everything in the year is going to unfold from that. But the last letter, which is the second Hey, this is the Einu Yoda L'Shoel. Doesn't even know how to ask. So we have to initiate. So in a certain sense, this is the sleeping holiday. This is the holiday that's been dormant under all the darkness of the exile. And now we're back in our home, and now it's our ability and our opportunity and our time to be able to awaken it. So that's why it's kind of interesting that they put together these ideas of these 4 questions, and the sages have talked to us about these ideas of the 4 cups. And there's a transition, although there's 2 opinions, I defer to the opinion that seems to be more popular, that the progression of the wine, it goes from white to gold to rouge and to red. So Reb Aaron suggested, because since this is a day of judgment, that's what the Rosh Hashanahs are all about, And therefore, red is always associated with din. That's fire, is red. On the other hand, water is always associated with chesed and kindness. So what we try to always do is we try to sweeten the judgment, not to eradicate the judgment, because judgment is a very, very, very vital and good thing. Especially if somebody rips you off, you're really happy that there's judgment to maybe get your money back. But even on more than that, din means form and shape, right? And as we get a little bit younger, we appreciate even more our form and shape. And suddenly we realize that the parts don't necessarily work like they used to. You know, we try to find the warranty, but good luck with that. But nonetheless, there is this awareness that we can sweeten din. So therefore we elevate from the white, which is the hesed, and we bring the chesed into the din in order to be able to sweeten it. And this is what Yaakov is all about. Yaakov is tasting the chesed of Abraham combined with the din of his father of Yitzchak and creating rachamim, mercy. And that's what we have to be, as a merciful people. We have to be a forgiving people. We have to be a loving people, but always with a sense of righteousness and din. They can't be one without the other, because either by itself is worthless. It's only when they combine together that a true expression can come in the world. V'titein emet liYaakov. Yaakov could be the harbor of truth, because he knows how to bring that together. So now we're going to go through the 4 cups of wine. I guess I'm going to be the guy who does the bracha here. Is that what you're suggesting? All right, so I just want to say I have 0 tolerance for alcohol. So, this is grape juice?
No, you want grape juice?
Oh, I'll go for it. So if from this point on you start hearing, so I'm going to see if I can get like the translation down here to like work. So anyhow, l'chaim everybody, l'chaim tovim shalom.
Us all in mind.
What's that?
You'll have us.
I'll have everybody who wants, I'll have them in mind. Anyone who wants to go solo, that's cool too. Baruch Ato Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Borei Pri Hagafen. Amen.
I want to come to your Purim Suda.
This is starting right now. You're in it.
30 days
So-
before, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah, right. Nachon. Sorry. I just want to say one little thing about l'chaim. L'chaim is a very interesting idea. What is life? What is chaim? Why do our sages tell us that most of the people who are living are not alive? And many people who are dead are still alive. Why do our sages tell us this? Why do our sages tell us that holy people continue to live after they're dead, and not so holy people are already dead even though they're still living? And I don't know if you remember this. I'm probably enough people in the room who will remember this, so I am going to go with this. But back in the day, when people used to go deep sea diving, unlike today, they had to wear this really funky metal suit and so on, and they had a tube that went all the way up to the ship where they had oxygen, right? That's kind of how they existed. Of course, there were the guys up there who were like blowing their cigarettes into that, but we'll leave that aside. So there was the guys who were walking around in these little things down there, and meanwhile, unbeknownst to them, a shark flew overhead, bit off the tube, and now this guy's still walking all around, having no idea that rapidly his oxygen supply is ending. So this is what happens. God forbid, we have these tubes, we have these roots in heaven, in Shemayim. You know, every time we do a mitzvah, we clean the spiritual cholesterol out of our soul, and more light and energy can come into us. And God forbid, every time we ignore that, we turn those two off. And we say, you know, in fact, I'll tell you a quick true story. It came back to my mind. See, the wine's kicking in. My Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Nota Schiller, Shlita, many years ago, he had one of his boys who's now a Rosh Hashiva himself, but at that time he was only 11. And we were at his house in Mattersdorf for Shabbos, and the little boy went out, and he came back and he told us the following story, that when he went out, there were some soldiers that were there smoking cigarettes in their community on Shabbos. And the little boy came over, very polite, Derech Eretz Kodem LaTorah, and he said to the soldiers, excuse me, sir, you know that today, perhaps you forgot that today's Shabbos. And they laughed at him, and they blew their cigarette smoke right on the little kid's face. Shabbos, Shmabbos, right? And then they said, look at this, watch. And one guy took a big drag, said, look, see, I'm smoking on Shabbos. I'm not being killed. I'm not dead. I'm still living. Snip, right? I'm still living. And so the little 11-year-old kid, without missing a beat, he said, well, actually, you know, you're giving yourself lung cancer. I mean, right, you're not instantly dead because God is benevolent and patient and hopes you'll do tshuva, but you're killing yourself smoking the cigarette. And when you destroy the Shabbat, you're killing yourself even if you don't see it right away because you don't see that the tube got cut. So what is life? So the sages had an interesting dilemma. They needed to come up with a substitute for actually writing God's name, because writing God's name is a very serious issue. One does not want to make a mistake. One doesn't, God forbid, want to throw out such a piece of writing with such a name, etc., etc. They needed to come up with something that could substitute the actual name of God without it being the name of God. And so the substitution was an interesting choice. They took one letter twice, which isn't really fair because you have 22 letters. Those of you that have probably learned the Akdama to the Zohar will know about the story of all the letters wanting to be the first letter of creation. So all these little letters are arguing, hey, me, and it takes one letter and it takes it twice. It takes the letter Yud and it takes another Yud. These two letters become a substitute for the name of God. Why? Why them? So the answer is because a Yud is a Yid. A Yud represents a Yehudi, a Jew in this world. And wherever two Jews, which is a miracle, as my friend over there said, whenever Jews get together, you have multiple opinions, right? So therefore, if two Jews can actually come together and like each other and get along with each other, that's where you'll find God. I'm going to digress. I know I shouldn't, but that's the alcohol. But I'm going to digress to one of the best jokes I've ever heard. So there's a sage, there's a whole chazal as to where did God decide to build the Beit HaMikdash. So everybody knows this, I'm sure. I'll do the brief, fast version. Oh, a little slower? Okay. So the story is that there were these two brothers. One was phenomenally rich, had no children. The other one was phenomenally poor and had lots of children. Not quite sure how that works, but that's how it works. And one day they both wake up on the same night and the rich one thinks, oh, my brother, he's so poor and he never would take any money from me. I'm going to sneak into his house and I'm going to put in there a whole bag of quids. And he'll have it, he won't know where it's from. Boop. And the other brother wakes up and says, you know, my brother's got all that money, big deal. You can't take the money to the park and put it on a swing. So I got all the kids, they're good, they're healthy. There's his uncle. I'm going to take some of the kids and I'm going to move them into his house and I'm just going to have them there before he knows he'll wake up. They'll be there and he'll be a very happy man. And as the two of them in the middle of the night are heading toward each other's home, they bump into each other and they immediately understand what's going on. They hug and they embrace. And Hashem says, that is where I want the Beit HaMikdash to be built. That's not the joke, by the way. That's the serious part. However, we now jump cut to trying to decide where the Knesset will be built. So now you have the exact same situation. Same two brothers, minor difference. One, the rich one, wakes up and says, Ma, what's with my brothers? Got all those kids, I got nobody. He won't miss a couple. I'm going to go over there and kidnap a few of them. And the other brother says, yeah, my brother's got so much freaking money, I can't make it to the end of the month. I'm going to sneak in and steal some of the money, won't even miss it. And the two of them bump into each other in the middle of the night, and they start beating the living daylights out of each other. And they said, that's where we're going to build the Knesset. Exactly. So therefore, this idea of Yud and Yud, this is what brings God into the world. As is said throughout the Nevi'im, Hashem himself says, better you should forget me than you should forget your fellow man. How do we find unity between each other? Well, there's two other letters. One letter is the letter Chet, and the other letter is the letter Mem. Chet Mem is Cham, warmth. That Devorim shebelev nichnosim belev, words that come out of your heart enter a person's heart. When somebody's talking to you from the heart, You feel that they're talking to you from their heart. And that warmth is how we talk to each other. When we talk to each other, heart to heart. And then there's another level. The same letters in the opposite direction spell the word moach, which is the brain. So therefore, when we talk to each other with wisdom, and we talk from our hearts with warmth and love, that creates chet, yud, yud, mem, chaim. That's what l'chaim is all about. That's what makes us alive, is to be able to connect with each other, to bond, to understand, and to feel. Okay, do we move now to the next cup?
Yeah, why not? My assumption is, wow, this is really high. My assumption is that everyone either washed or made a mazonot already. The other thing would be, the next one would be olives. Olives. So there was also barley in the soup, right? So we had those who had the delicious soup. Thank you, Bina. It was delicious. So the next thing is olives. So there are olives on the, yeah? Everyone can take an olive. We can make a bracha brei eights.
Sure.
Can I have one? Thanks.
Like that?
Okay, so does everyone have an olive? If they already made a bracha, you don't have to. Shouldn't. If you didn't, make your own bracha. Baruch ato Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Boirei Pari Ha'etz. Now, the truth be told, we do have some other eights. We don't make another bracha, but I do want to make a special mention on the esrog. Everyone should have something that looks like this. I'll make the shechianu because when I tasted it, when I made it, I had no intention to really benefit from it. Okay.
Where the esrog?
So the esrog looks like this. And, yeah. So, Rav Gedaliah mentioned, if we have intention, he mentioned tomorrow afternoon before Mincha or after Mincha. I think the more you eat, the merrier. But if you have intention already tonight. And so if you could take, and I'll make a shechianu, by the way. I think anybody who probably never had it this year yet.
Rabbi, do you have these?
So if I can just grab a piece here. It's quite sweet. Usually it doesn't have the most, I don't know what you would say, the best taste. It grows on you. But since we already made an eighth, then we'll make the shechianu for anybody that wants. Baruch ato Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lahazman hazeh.
It is good. Well done.
No, the trick is corn syrup. I didn't use it. I couldn't find it. Okay, what's after olive? Okay, dates. Dates are the next thing in line.
Nina, where did you get the
Okay, now this is how a date is eaten. You cut it open, you remove the seed, and you check that it's not that it's still healthy and there's nothing growing in it. We don't eat bugs. Okay, so we have in mind for the dates no bracha because we already made the bracha brei eights.
Anybody needs me times.
Okay, we're going to take a break and do the grape. but we'll do the second cup. Okay, so there should be grapes on the table. Yeah, so the second,
Second is red.
no, second is white with a bit of red.
Look at that.
That's white.
That's white.
Yeah, believe it or not, I know. That's white wine, and that's white grape juice. So take the second cup, which will be, let's say, 3/4 white with some red.
In the room, I just want to thank my band.
Wow, thank you.
Nadav Levi. To do it before about 25 years. We've been from Australia to America to many places, and we played for years and years. Thank you, thank you. Avi Halevi, what a privilege. To my friend Shuli Solomon, the son of Ben Zion Solomon, the great Solomon Brothers band, and how many other bands? Soul's Hill Farm is a Noach Solomon. And then there's the Moshe band in Los Angeles, that's Yehuda and Solomon, and there's other great musicians besides. And thank you so much for being here. And Akiva is joining us tonight, Akiva Levi, part of the Yiboneh team, I understand. And he's doing a beautiful job of giving us a little percussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so just a reminder, before we finish and bench, we still have some words of Torah from Rabbi Gedaliah, but we want to make sure we get all the meaning in. So for those who had wine, that's fine. Grapes are here. Now figs are very complicated in terms of checking them for bugs, but they're not impossible. So you open it up nice and wide, And then you, remember Fig Newtons? The land of Israel truly is the Garden of Eden. Next is pomegranates. Pomegranates are on the table.
Pomegranate.
Guys, you can eat as much as you want. Pomegranates are next. In the booklets, explains all the different spiritual insights into all the different para. Now, carob is not easy. What can I tell you? Maybe we should have gotten like that chocolate milk. You know what I mean? The powder. But anyway, the carobs are here somewhere.
Right here.
Yeah, you chew on them. The carob looks like this. You can pass that back to them. It could taste like chocolate if you have a good imagination. Okay, you need a good imagination, right?
You're right.
Nothing like the land of Israel. Delicious. If you want to take some carobs home with you, please.
Please.
Okay, apple. There is apple on the table. I don't want to rush things. We still have 2 more cups of wine or grape juice.
Did we do the second cup?
Yeah, but there's altogether 4. We did 2. We did 2 cups. So after the apple, maybe before the apple, we only did 2 cups. Anyway, everyone counts on their own, right? Everyone do their own counting. So for those like me who have already drunk 2 cups of grape juice, we can now pour our third, which is majority red with a little bit of white. Let's do that before the apple. Okay.
This was the majority of red and a little light.
We didn't have this yet. We already.
What happened? People losing track?
This is the
We have a literalist.
Oh.
Applejack.
Again, the volunteers who help set the tables, some really fancy and original artwork here. Okay, bottoms up. Okay, before the 4th cup, before we get to the 4th cup, the apple. We're just reminding everybody what is here on the table. Then we have the almond shkedim. Just a quick word about the shkedia. What does shaked mean? It means to go quick, hurriedly. Hurriedly? Such a word exists? Hurriedly. Soon, very soon, the first blossoms, aside from the cherry blossoms, that is, the first blossoms that we will see will be from the shkedia, from the almond tree. That's what the word.
In Talpiot, right near here, there's one full bloom.
Already, a shked. So this is the time. This is where the first blossoms will happen, right here in Eretz Yisrael, in Baka, Garden of Eden.
Right, just in back of you.
Now the last thing was the esrog, but I couldn't hold myself back from the shechianu. So indulge yourself again with some kavanah. Think about everything that Rabbi Gedaliah shared with us from beginning with conception, the first thoughts, into reality, right? Going forth into reality with hopefully a lot of holiness, a lot of contemplation, a lot of meaning. This month actually is mindfulness. That's a new word, it's an old word. Anything that's new isn't true. Anything that is true isn't new. Mindfulness has always been, and this is the month of mindfulness. So, with that in mind, we're on the fourth cup?
Yeah.
Okay.
All red.
All red. Let's do it.
Better red than dead.
What was that? From communist?
I used to say it the other way.
Better red than dead.
I used to say better dead than red.
Okay.
I didn't quite agree with that.
Okay, so for those who are indulging in grape juice, like myself, or wine, bottoms up.
Chaim.
Chaim! For sure.
I'm always going to think of you when I say L'chaim now.
Chaim. What? No, I think Gedaliah's going to speak now. Is that right?
Yeah. I'll say the last before benching.
Before benching, then you'll do like a Neon Shir Malas and...
Yeah, I'll say the last. I'm talking about Shir Malas.
Which one, kind of wine do you like? White or red?
Okay, this is going to be short. And I know people are like getting a little edgy, and we're sensitive to that. So let's see if I can. There we go. This is going to be a kind of a to the point Devar Torah. This is the takeaway Torah. The rest was important, and it's, hopefully fun and interesting. But this is something I think that at the end of the evening, after all that we've experienced, that there should be something really meaningful that has a real takeaway. So I'm going to share a Devar Torah from the Belzer Rebbe. I'm going to just get it here on my Siddur. And it's a whole insight into the Song of Shir Malas, which we are probably going to say before we bench. And we have enough people here, we can even say Elokeinu in the benching, which is very special. So everybody's probably familiar with this Tehillim, the Psalm. And I'll start from the point where he begins to talk. He says here, well, first I'll go through the normal translation. Hazorim bedima berina yiktsaru, that we will plant with tears, but we will harvest with joy. Holek yelech uvocha, we went crying, nosei meshech hazara, carrying our sack of seeds. Boyavo berina, but when we return, nosei alumotav, we had bundles. When we left, we had seeds. When we returned, we had bundles. Okay, so that's the simple understanding and the translation of that psalm. Now I'll explain to you, share with you how the Belzer Rebbe reinterprets it into a very beautiful insight. He says like this: Hazarim, we are all planters. Every day is the field, and what we think and what we say and what we do are the seeds that we plant in our eternity. In other words, really, if you think about it, Sefer Torah has columns. So each one of our lives is a Sefer Torah. And each morning, when we wake up in the morning, we are actually facing a blank column. And whatever we think, whatever we say, whatever we do is written by our own, if you will, spiritual hand on that column. And that column is lenetzach. It's forever. In our intersection, remember in geometry, we had two circles and they overlapped? This is the overlap between a spiritual infinite world and a very finite physical world. But the beauty of it is that in the infinite, there's no friction. And it's only through friction that you can maintain motion. So therefore, we are in a world of friction, which the friction, when it goes negative, becomes milchama, which is war. And when it goes positive, the same letters become lechem, which is bread, the sustenance of life. But both of them are that relationship of friction. And the friction, therefore, is, in a sense, gives us the opportunity to create our own infinity in what we do. So he says, therefore, no matter what you do, we are all planters, but there are two schools of thought. One school is Bedima, and the other school is Barina. One school is people who live their lives depressed. They're sad. They're bummed out. They have become prisoners of things that happened in their past. And the past has stolen their future. And they live their lives walking backwards, always pointing fingers at things that happened to them in their past, why they are no longer able to be joyful and succeed in their future. These are the criers. But then there are the other people. They're the school of Barina. They're the school that's come to understand that everything that happened is Gamzel L'Tovah. It's all for the best. It was all from Hashem, no matter how difficult it was to be able to understand it, what we call the fourth wall of the sukkah. No matter how hard it is to have that somech on Hashem completely, nonetheless, we have the emunah to believe and understand that it was all somehow just and really for our best. And therefore we can turn to the future and learning the lessons of our past, free ourselves from our past and own our future. And to be able to really live a life going forward of joy. But guess what? Both schools, yiktzoru, they will harvest. What will be the results of their harvest? Well, now back to the first school. Holech yelech uvacha nosei meshech hazara. Holech, halicha, to walk, is really emphasizing going away, getting away, escaping away, running away, finding somehow, somewhere where you can be away from all the things that are bothering you in your past. That kind of a mentality, such a person comes with their seeds, with their potential, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu rewards them with that. That's what they are. Nosei meshech hazara. They put in zera. They got zera. Hashem pays you for what you did. Finished. You did the work. You got your money. Goodbye. But the other school has a completely different perspective. Bo yavo berina. It's also constantly moving because there's no such thing as stagnant time. Everything is moving. But your emphasis is arrival. You're coming to something new. You're arriving to something new. Each time you kiss the mezuzah, you are moving from one dimension into the next dimension and knowing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be with you. Even though the unknown can be scary and frightening, it's okay because you touch the mezuzah before you enter that and you know HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there with you. And so therefore a person can embrace the future. They can embrace their life. They can embrace everything HaKadosh Baruch Hu put in us to be able to take the zera and turn it into alu mosav, into a tenfold, or as we say, 100-fold. And that's really the challenge of our free will of our life, to be able to set ourselves free from a world of always blaming and pointing the finger and being depressed and sad, and being able to turn it, God willing, into a life of joy and embracing the future and going forward into life and be able to really harvest much more than merely what we did, to be able to claim all the gifts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us.
I just want to close with a few words. Just once again want to thank every single one of you, because the night would not have been the same, and I'm not just saying that. I absolutely mean it. And I mentioned in the beginning that Bina and I probably know 85, 90% of you. Personally, you've been in our lives, you've been to our events, you've been, we have a community. This is a certain sense. Everyone has 5 or 6 communities in their life, but this happens to be just one of them that you have with us and we share. And I think it was an amazing evening. I know we kind of went through it kind of quickly, but we wanted to keep everybody engaged as much as possible in the shortest amount of time as possible. I want to thank Gedaliah once again, of course, my wife, but Cham Dovid, of course, my wife, and every single one of you, of course, my wife.
Smart man.
So before we bench, we have a special song, a well-known song, an oldie, but a goodie.
Goldie.
A goldie.
We should find a Kohen.
I could.
You should. Do you know what's Kohen?
Yeah.
We can Is there a Kohen in the house? Let me take care of
It's
it.
not so well known, but it's the words that were just spoken. So we're going to sing the song, the words of the beautiful Torah we just heard from Rabbi Gedaliah. Shuv Hashem et sheviteinu k'afikim b'neged. Shuv Hashem et sheviteinu k'afikim b'neged.
Listen, living in Jewish life is like being in a musical. There's no question. From one snippet to another. I just want to mention a few things before we bench. Number one, for those who are not yet signed up on our mailing list, please do so. For those who have not yet subscribed to our Yiboneh YouTube channel, please do so. For those who have not yet made the list for the sponsors for tonight's evening, you can still do so. For those who walked in late, didn't pay, you can still do so. Well, there's so many things we can do. You can still do so. Anyway, in the meantime, we're going to bench and say, here we go.
Rabbatai Nevarech Yishem Adonai Mevarach Be'etavid Olam B'Shuta Rabbanim B'Kohanim Baruch Rabbanan Rabbatai Nevarech Eloheinu Shechalnu B'Shalom Baruch Eloheinu Shechalnu B'Shalom Tavo Chayinu Baruch Shmo Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Azan et olam kulo b'tuvo b'chein b'chesed u'rachamim U'noten lachem l'chol basar ki li'olam chasdo U'v'tuvo hagadol Tavi lo chasar lanu v'yelechsar lanu Azon li'olam ba'ed ba'vor shemo hagadol Q el zad u'pardes la'kol U'beitiv la'kol U'bechim ba'zo Chol b'yotav asher bara Baruch atah Adonai azad et hakol Amen Adonai Eloheinu shechat lebeteinu eretzchem tador v'chatol shechat Baruch atah Adonai al haaretz v'al hamazon Baruch atah Adonai b'nei b'rachamav Yishlayim Amen. V'rachamim v'chaim v'shalom v'chol tovim mikol tov l'olam melech Yisraelu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam b'rei Pri Hagafen.
Shir Chadash, oh,